You're listening to Filling the Storehouse podcast. I'm David.
And I'm Stuart, and we want to walk with you on the journey to living the abundant life through faith, family, and freedom. Our goal is to refine our why while helping you find yours. Together, achieve our best and highest purpose. In the end, we'll drive each other to intentionally fill our storehouse.
Hey, this is Stu. And hey, did you know that as of 2016, there are more than 40.6 million people in modern day slavery, and that the business of human trafficking creates over 150 billion in profit every year? Yes, that's billion with a B. Human trafficking is a global crime that is woven into our lives more than we realize. Trafficking happens every day all over the world, and it affects individuals of every age, ethnicity, and socioeconomic background. Well, our friends at Exodus Road say that we believe that justice is in the hands of the ordinary people just like you, and everyone has a role to play in bringing freedom to trafficked sons and daughters around the world. And so do we at Storehouse 310 Ventures. This has become a passion of ours to support Exodus Road and fight this hideous crime. So we've created the Storehouse Giving Fund. It's a donor-advised fund, and we hope that us ordinary people can all come together and fight this ridiculous, hideous crime. So join us in the fight against human trafficking. I've put a link in the show notes of this podcast episode to our giving fund. And we would greatly appreciate it if you helped us and just donated a little bit. Seriously, everything, even the smallest amounts, count. So go enjoy this episode and go to that link in our show notes and support us and support Exodus Road. Go fill your storehouse. See you.
All right. This is Filling the Storehouse podcast, and I am incredibly excited about our conversation today with Laura Parker. But before we get into that, Laura, yesterday, David was over at my house, and we had all the kids. We were in the backyard jumping on the trampoline, and I was in there with the kids, lightly kind of bouncing them and double bouncing them. And David was like, "Hey, do you want me to come in and I'll jump the kids to really jump the kids?" I was like, "No, because you'll go launching them over the net.
You'll break an arm.
Yeah, you will break something."
No.
And
to be fair, I've launched hundreds of kids on hundreds of occasions, and there's only been minor neck strains, no broken, but that's their fault.
The whiplash.
Don't embrace, don't absorb the jump in your knees, or else it'll make your neck kind of do some weird things. So when they do that, they didn't follow instructions, and that's on them. It goes, man.
Yeah, that's on warning to all parents: don't put your kid in the trampoline with David Gutierrez.
Warning to all parents: if you don't want your kids to have the time of their life and have an amazing time, then don't let them come over to my house. You're right.
Laura, it's great to see you. Great to have you on. It's been a while because I know you've been incredibly busy, going over to all kinds of places all over the world and doing amazing stuff and taking over as the CEO of the Exodus Road. So we're going to get into all of that. But first, before we kind of get into a ton of information, if you could just kind of give us a little bit of backstory about who you are. We've had your husband, Matt, on a couple of times now. But just give us a little brief background about who you are and what you're doing.
Yeah. So my name is Laura Parker, and I live in Colorado Springs, and I'm the co-founder of the Exodus Road, which is a nonprofit fighting human trafficking. And I'm also a mom. I have 3 kids. They are, remember their ages, 14, almost 14. No. Oh my gosh. I literally cannot remember my children's ages. No. Okay. I got it. 15, 17, and 19.
Awesome.
So yeah, 2 girls and a boy. And yeah, I'm full-time working mom, also get to travel. And we have been fighting human trafficking for about a decade now.
Yeah, and one thing that we were talking about beforehand. So when Stu and I were looking at different organizations to support, one of the things we like to do is some pretty extensive research, and then usually it always culminates in a conversation with the founders, or just to kind of get to know folks. And I'll tell you, when I was looking through, I don't even remember why. It's a couple of years ago. I don't remember why human trafficking had really crept up so high on my list, but it was something that I think there was awareness of, especially being military guys. But it just was something that was that was so powerful and important to us. And so I found the Exodus Road somehow, and you have a book, an ebook that you can download. And I'm like, well, what better way to kind of find out about this organization? And so I read your book, and I think immediately shot it to Stu, printed it out, passed it around my office. And it was so impactful for me. And that's really what drove us to reach out to you guys, was had nothing to do with Matt or any of the relationship that we had formed after. It was all about your book and just the impact. And what was it was just so intriguing to me was the perspective that you brought to it as the one, a supportive wife, but a partner in these things. But just by the nature of the business, Matt, being a man, was a more likely individual to go buy sex, basically, right? I mean, that's the demographic. And so if you don't mind just talking a little bit about, the founding and the book, and because I'll tell you, if for those of our listeners that haven't read it, it's quick read, super good. I think I sat down and read it in one sitting, and it's on the website. I'm assuming it's still there. You just download it and get after it.
That's free. Yeah. Yeah. I think, definitely when I got married, when I was just turned 21, I never envisioned that my husband would be a undercover operative into the sex trade in Thailand. That was not part of
that wasn't part of the
deal.
Oh,
yeah, that
weird.
was not part of the vision. We grew up in great families, conservative Christian families, and we were just young and in love, still are in love. Matt was my high school prom date. We went to senior prom together. So we really grew up together, and we really had built a pretty fantastic life for ourselves. We were actually in Woodland Park, Colorado. Matt was a youth pastor. I had 3 small kids. They were 3, 5, and 7. And I think for the first time in my life, I had really felt settled and happy and full and content. And then he comes home one day and says, "Hey, I think that we need to move to Thailand for 2 years," which was like a complete curveball to me. And I really had to wrestle with that because I really didn't want to go. He had gotten offered a position to run a children's home for impoverished girls from the hill tribe regions of northern Thailand. And so it was a 2-year commitment. And I remember really, really struggling with the idea of it, again, because I was so comfortable where I was. And my focus at that point in my life was it was the 3 kids and the 3 precious little people I had at home as a stay-at-home mom, and my world was them. And I couldn't get past thinking about what would happen to them if we moved them away from their friends and their little preschools and their church. But through a series of circumstances, God just kept tugging on my heart, and we ended up going and landed in northern Thailand to work at this children's home. And it was disaster from the beginning. I think a lot of people think, like when you do something hard and you feel like you're in obedience, things will work out. And it's been my experience that a lot of times it doesn't work out how you expect it to. And it's actually not easier than you think. It's harder than you think. And that was our experience. I mean, that first year there were rats in our kitchen. My son, who was 5 years old at the time, we had some friends visiting us, and he showed up at the top of the stairs with a suitcase packed I'm serious, as they were leaving to go back home to America. And he said, "Please, can they take me with them?
Wow.
You guys can pick me up when you're done here."
Oh my goodness.
That is rough. That's hard.
So it was rough, hard. But eventually we got our feet under us a little bit. And after about a year, Matt went to this meeting that had all of these nonprofits that were interested in counter human trafficking work. And honestly, we didn't really know a lot about human trafficking as an issue. We had Googled it and we had seen the movie Taken. And that was about where our knowledge lay. And so he went to this meeting, and there were multiple organizations there. And at this meeting, they split up organizations between prevention and intervention and aftercare. So kind of the three major focuses of counter trafficking work. And he said it was like the parting of the Red Sea, like half went to prevention and the other half went to aftercare, and no one went to intervention. And so he stepped into that, and that relationship was what connected him to a Thai police officer who is in charge of human trafficking cases. And then we started learning that the real need that we were seeing right in our community was for undercover investigations into the sex trade. So so that's the kind of the beginning of the story. And go ahead.
Yeah. So as the wife, for Matt coming home and saying, "Hey, Laura, what do you think about me, starting doing, undercover investigations and going into brothels and, hiring underage girls for sex?" Like, I mean, how does that come off? Like, what?
Yeah. It was so interesting because I think my journey as a mom was still my journey as a mom, which caused me at the beginning to want to stay in the same place. It was that same motivation, thinking of my own kids, that actually caused me to say yes to this work, because I kept thinking, the closer and closer I got to the reality of it, I kept thinking, what if it were my own kids? What if it were Kelty, Cade, or Ava? And we had gotten tricked, and our kids were somewhere in the middle of Bangkok being forced to service customers 10 times a day and had no means of escape and no means of getting back home to us. Would I not want someone to figure it out? Would I not want some wife to, even though she didn't know it was coming and what it would cost her marriage, would I want her to be brave enough to step into that reality? And would I want my husband to be brave enough to step into that reality if it were our own kids? And so, so I said yes. And I think, from the very beginning, one of the things that we felt really strongly about was that it wouldn't be fair for me as a wife to send him into battle, so to speak. And then when he comes home and he's carrying the burden or the trauma of that, for me to somehow punish him for the results of what he had to carry. So at the very beginning, we said, hey, I'm going to watch all of your undercover footage. He started wearing body-worn cameras. And so I would watch every single inside of a brothel. I would listen to him ask for sex from minors. And I think for me, that was really important because it allowed us to stay connected in the work instead of this division where he was carrying this heavy trauma and then being invited into shame for what he saw or, the places that he was in. And so I think that was really pretty critical for us in the early days. And even now too, like the amount of there were together even in the work, which is really, I think, been pretty critical to our being able to do this for 10 years.
Yeah, I love that. It's such an amazing way to look at, what you guys are doing. Before we hit record, you were kind of telling us about, some of the challenges you've been through. Now, you guys have been doing this for like 10 years now, fighting human trafficking, and, all God driven, but not always easy. Right. And there's a lot that you've kind of said that you've learned through following Christ, through saying, yes, Lord, use me, but it's not going to be easy. And I'm curious kind of what are some of those lessons learned that you've kind of gone through in the last 10 years?
Yeah. I think I set out thinking that with this false idea that there is this formula for following God. And it's that if you follow and do the right thing and sacrifice, then things will work out and you'll get to see miracles. And in my mind, the miracle was having finances rain on us and having people like us and having cases work out and being in front of a cheering crowd that was so proud of the hard work we were doing. And in my experience, that just hasn't been the case. That it's not that I haven't seen miracles, it's that I haven't seen the kind of miracles that are the logical ones that I wanted to see, the kind that is the feeding of the 5,000 or the walking on the water. It's been these miracles that have been a lot more internal and a lot more under the surface. And I think in so many ways, God has rescued me from myself. And he has shown me what it means to trust. It's like I wanted the miracle of quick financial and organizational success, but the miracle that I actually am experiencing is this dependency for every day for God to provide. And the miracle that I wanted was, to be a social media famous person that could like point people to justice. But I operate in relative anonymity. And I think God did that on purpose because the actual miracle is that he rescued me from my own ego. And so I think he has taught me more about himself and about myself through things not working out than through things being easy.
Yeah, I think that's so insightful. Oftentimes I feel like in my faith as well that we put God in this box, right? And this expectation of this human mind that can't even conceive, like an ant conceiving of the internet, as Rick Warren always likes to say. But the idea that we even understand what those blessings are, what they look like, what we have in store, and I'm, it always makes me wonder how much I'm missing out on God's blessings by not stepping out in faith because something wasn't necessarily the way that I and my infinite wisdom thought that it would turn out and look like. And I think that's a beautiful way to frame faith, because I think there's a lot of people, there's even people that we've talked to recently having that there's some faith struggle because it's just the expectations may be a certain place, or our desired outcome may be a certain place. And it's just not how God works. Right. I mean, Jesus, you look at his ministry and most people hated him and he died on a cross. Like that's not really the culmination of, what you'd expect.
Success story. Yeah.
Or success story. Right.
He wasn't super popular on Instagram. Right.
No, he wasn't super popular on Instagram. And he didn't have a ton of followers at that point. But I think you guys are making generational impact. Right. And I think the miracles are also things that you'll never see. It's a miracle in that child that is lost in the middle of Bangkok that you described that does get saved, and the rest of their life is a miracle. And that's not something that you guys are have to focus on saving more, and not for that one little girl or boy. Their life has been given back, and there's a miracle in that. And I think that's so powerful. I'm curious, as you were talking about it, I'd like to hear more about your kids. As a father of 3 as well, I have one daughter and 2 sons. We love to travel, and now with this awareness of human trafficking, I guess just a different level. We'll talk about awareness later because I think that's a big problem. But I oftentimes I go down these mental paths of like, oh my gosh, what if just right in front of my house, like what if? And I'm just curious how your kids in this environment, how you've seen them grow and the blessings that you've seen, because their life has been very unique. They have parents that are involved. I mean, you guys are heroes, right? And to be kids of that, I think is very interesting. So if you don't mind if sharing a little bit about just how their childhood and up to this point now and how that's been an impact on their lives.
Yeah, well, I definitely would not call us heroes. But I will say that for our kids, I think I tell them all the time, anything of value or anything worth doing is going to cost. And I think, we've made a lot of mistakes as we've raised them in this work. I think we have not shielded them enough, honestly, from some of the struggle and some of the heartbreak that we've been called to walk. I think uniquely because the co-founders are married, it was really difficult to not talk about the latest obstacle or the latest betrayal or the latest struggle over the dinner table. And that, I think, from a young age brought them into that kind of the heartbreak sometimes of trying to figure out God's next best step. However, I do think it's really built their resilience, and they are really strong, and they have this perspective of the world that is our life and our privilege and the resources that we have. You're not supposed to keep those. And the point of it is to give it away for the most vulnerable. The point of it is to lay down your life. And I think in that way, it's been really, really good. I think they also have an awareness of other cultures. They have an awareness of people on the margins. They have a great depth. All three of them have a great depth of compassion for the outsider. And I think that's because they grew up hearing about those that were on the margins and those that were on the outside. I will say as well that we do have a therapy fund for each of them that when they graduate, they can leverage to to talk through all of the issues that we unintentionally handed them.
And just out of curiosity, just as follow on, are they interested in pursuing the family business, or are they looking to, because your kids are now getting to college age and making those decisions. So just curious what they're looking at.
Yeah. We always kind of talk about that some. I do have one daughter that is interested in humanitarian work. Really, both daughters are interested in humanitarian work. I would say all my kids in some way are interested in serving others, but they definitely have different paths. We have one daughter that has joked and said that she wants to be an investigator, but our rule is organizationally, you can't be an investigator until you're 30 years old. So she's got some time to wait. Yeah. But yeah, I think, in whatever space it is, I think they all have hearts to impact change. And I think have pretty big ideas of what is possible when just ordinary people step in and try to throw all their energy into solving a problem.
So you've recently taken over as CEO, and you have a lot of new stuff going on, and I want to get into that in a second. But on the similar lines, like I would assume that it is incredibly hard to be a leader in a nonprofit organization right now, specifically in human trafficking. And I'm curious what kind of struggles that you guys have gone through lately.
Yeah, it's really tough. I think, any nonprofit leader, it just has remarkable grit, I think, because, with a business, you're raising money and you're delivering a product. And in nonprofit work, you are just selling the product of the good work. And that is really difficult, especially in a time of COVID where people are struggling financially anyway. And then I think on the other side, not only are you operating a business that does fundraising and donor care and transparency and systems on that side, but then you're also developing internationally very complex systems to actually implement and do the work. And a lot of organizations either do one or the other. A lot of organizations in the States especially are essentially they focus on the first part and they raise the money, and then they have partners that do the implementation. And for us, we do both. And so it's just incredibly complex. It's complex to operate internationally in corrupt environments in one of the most riskiest fields imaginable. And then on this side of the house, the fundraising donor side of the house, it's complex to be able to communicate that work when you're protecting survivors, you're protecting dignity, you have security issues. And then you're also battling just a general lack of awareness in the world about what human trafficking is and how serious of a crime it is and how pervasive it is. So you have to not only educate people on what the problem is with very limited ability to actually share details, oftentimes, that you also have to motivate and inspire them to care about people on the margins and donate in a way that they're not getting a product. And then on the other side of the house, you're having to face impossible odds day in and day out and face incredible risk. So like on both sides, we're having to climb pretty big hills all around.
Yeah, and you guys are, you alluded to it, but some folks raise money and then they partner. Others, they will focus on. I think you mentioned earlier that there's a party in the Red Seas. There's the aftercare. There's the awareness, the intervention, all those things. But you guys are pretty much a one-stop shop, right? So if you could talk about, because I know you guys have had some significant advancements in particularly, well, I don't want to say particularly aftercare, because you guys are engaged in every level of it. But if you could just give us some of the some updates on the new stuff that you guys are really focused on and trying to build out.
Yeah. For the first 8 years, we were pretty laser focused on intervention. How do we train and equip national investigators to assist police in finding current victims of trafficking, gathering the evidence that's needed so that we can impact survivor rescues and arrests? So that was kind of our key area of focus. But COVID, because it grounded all of us for a while, it gave us an opportunity to begin to think outside of the box. And one of the things that came out of that was this concept around training. And it was this idea of, okay, we have 8 years of experience on the front lines in corrupted environments, gathering intel that actually works. How do we leverage that training and equip other law enforcement agencies for how to do this work? And so this year, we've launched Traffic Watch Academy in Brazil, which is set to train over 20,000 law enforcement officers throughout the country of Brazil about how to fight human trafficking crime. So that's super exciting. It's free. It's all digital. And most of the modules are actually taught by Brazilian experts. So that's really exciting too, that we're centering Brazilian experts to impact their own people. So that's exciting. And then on the other side of the house, we were actually able to launch last year our first dedicated aftercare shelter. So it's called the Freedom Home. It's in Thailand, and it's both a safe house and a mentorship program that serves adult survivors and also welcomes their children. And so that's been really exciting to watch take off. We have multiple clients there now, and we have their sweet little children running around there now. And that program, it has a trauma-informed counseling, life skills classes, and then it also has really exciting tracks for building their own sustainability and their own employment, their own careers, which is really what survivors need. They need the trauma-informed therapy, but they also need a way to make successful livings for themselves and for their families. And so we do entrepreneurship training and job skills training to ensure that happens. So that's exciting. So now we do invest in training, intervention, and then the aftercare piece of it. But it really is such a massive problem. I mean, 40 million modern day slaves. It's going to take a million Exodus roads and a million different organizations attacking this problem from all angles. And partnership and collaboration is really, really critical it is mission critical for sure in this issue.
When you guys are moving into more countries as well, correct?
Yeah, we actually just launched into the Philippines. So we have had multiple cases there already in the Philippines, which is super exciting. And then we also have a volunteer team that is standing up some OSINT services for us to fight trafficking right here in the US, which we're also really excited about getting that off the ground this year.
Wow, that's awesome. And you guys are doing more intelligence now too on getting that front going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is true that you cannot be about this work if you are not paying attention to what's happening online. I think COVID all the statistics underscore that COVID just increased that an already really significant problem. And so, we've been trying to solve this problem around how do we impact change here in the US, because trafficking does happen right here in the United States. A lot of times people think it only happens in third world countries, but it happens right here in our own backyards. And a lot of times it happens online, or there's evidence that can be gathered online. And so, yeah, we're really thankful this year. We have a team of volunteers that's coming alongside us and is going to help us with some open source intelligence, data scraping, which will be exciting. And then we also have a great partnership with a company out of Israel called Celebrate, which we deploy mostly internationally, but we come alongside and gift technology to get information from trafficker cell phones with police. So those are two kind of the ways that we're trying to employ tech in this space to try to stay ahead of the curve.
So literally this morning, while taking my daughter to school, she's 7. And we have a neighbor who's 11, and then David and his kids were over yesterday, and my daughter who's 7 asked if she could have a phone. And I was like, no, honey, you can't have a phone yet. I'm sorry. And she was like really disappointed. Like she wants a phone because she sees, her older, cousins and neighbors and having phones. And I'm trying to explain to her, like in a 7-year-old way, like, well, there's dangers by having a phone, and there's, people on the internet and social media. And I'm trying to like tailor my conversation to a 7-year-old. And I was struggling. Like I was having a hard time trying to tell my daughter why she can't have a phone right now at the age of 7. And I'm curious, how do you have any recommendations of what, like for me, and like how do we, one, be aware? How do we spread this word, and how do we teach our children dangers now that I don't know, like I don't think there were these dangers 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And I'm honestly really nervous about growing my child up in an environment that we're in now. And I have a feeling it's just going to get worse.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I don't know.
Yeah, it is a growing concern for sure. And I think you're smart not to give your 7-year-old a phone with internet access.
Yeah.
We have actually a whole landing page with a whole list of resources for parents about digital safety for their kids. So I can send you that after we talk. And there are a lot of tools that you can use as parents, and as your kids do get phones or do get online. We have one at our house that shuts down all the Wi-Fi access after a certain amount of time, and it's usually in the middle of a battle on the video game, and we always hear no, right in the middle.
Right.
To cut off. That's right
awesome.
When he was going to win the whatever battle or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important and also exhausting and overwhelming as a parent, because our parents didn't have to think about that. They didn't have to think about these kind of dangers, right? Yeah. And it's so complicated, but there are good tools out there. But it takes some work and intentionality to set it up and just to draw the line. I would say that it's a lot easier to have stricter rules at the beginning. It's really hard to put the cat back in the bag, right? So that was one of the things that we tried to do, is just stall as much as possible to let them get social media, or to let them get phones, or to let them, because it's really hard to control that. We're putting in our kids' hands, they don't have the emotional intelligence, they don't have the discipline, they don't have the worldly knowledge to understand the digital world and what can come at them. And so we really have to step in and protect them of that. But I would say resources. And then the other thing I would say is, one of the things we've done with our kids is we've just had really awkward conversations all the time. And it's just terrible, phone checks and, let me read your texts, and this is probably not legit, et cetera, just having all these awkward conversations around what they're seeing and what they're posting and all of that stuff. But I think that's parents have to be courageous to step into that, because it's a whole new Wild West out there for sure.
And I think that a large part of the problem is not just what the kids are seeing, what they're exposed to, but it's the fact that parents have no clue. The parents aren't, whether it's there's a lot of reasons why we wouldn't, but I think a lot of it is engagement. And I look at, it's shocking to me that, I still have conversations, and maybe it shouldn't be shocking, but I had a conversation the other day with somebody, and we were talking about Exodus Road, and this particular individual, friend of mine, was like, I didn't even know that stuff happened. I'm like, man, there's 40 million slaves, modern day slaves, and people with kids are still unaware that there are people, maybe in our neighborhoods trying to exploit their children. And I think it's such a sad thing. And I'm kind of curious if there's any data out there to show, like, how could we would it just be an expansion of awareness that could make a significant impact on this problem? Like, is it that easy? I know there's a lot of, a darkness, and there's a lot of evil and a lot of, criminal activity. And these criminals are sophisticated, a lot of them, but would just simple awareness and taking the time to be, maybe just take an interest, would that curtail this activity quite a bit?
It really would. I think people can't behave differently if they don't know that a problem exists, right? And I think the problem with human trafficking and sex trafficking specifically, and sexual exploitation of minors, is it feels very dark and it feels very scary. And I think there's so much in our culture that has a lot of shame around anything to do with sex, right? That a lot of times people just don't want to step towards the issue. They don't want to know about it. They feel like it's too dark, it's too scary, it's too traumatic. It might press on old wounds of exploitation they've experienced themselves, or mistakes that maybe they have made in the past. And so they just don't want to have the conversation. And I think that, things grow in the dark, right? And things grow in the dark, bad things grow in the dark. And I think that's one of the major issues to fighting this particular social justice issue. And then I think on the other side, I think it's about 60% of those that are victims of human trafficking are actually in forced labor. And when you start really looking at behavior that needs to change to impact that, it means that people have to start buying fair trade. They have to start demanding that things be ethically sourced. And that is a choice that consumers have to make, that touches close to home, right? Because it's not just giving $20 at the end of the year on Giving Tuesday. It's, oh, wait, I can't shop at this place anymore, or I can't buy that food anymore. We talked to fishermen in Thailand who were victims of forced labor on shrimping boats. And these men were literally kidnapped, and they were put on boats out to sea, and they were forced to work 16 to 20 hours a day under horrible conditions. Massive abuse. One gentleman told us of his friend that died, and they just threw his body overboard. Another gentleman told us of his friend that died, and because he was trying to get away and get off the boat, and they put his body in the freezer so that the other men would have to look at it and be reminded that they better not try to escape. And I asked the guy that we were interviewing, I said, well, if you could say one thing to American consumers, what would you want them to know about human trafficking or about your experience? And they were they were shrimp fishermen. And he said, don't buy shrimp, because more than likely we were the ones that sourced it. And it's just like, when you know that, all of a sudden it starts to mess with your life, right? and that's difficult. And so I think there's a lot of that too going on. People know that, or maybe even at a subconscious level, they know that if they if they know about it, then they're going to have to do something about it. And that feels a bit painful.
Well, how does David and Stu know more about, what came from human trafficking, social, worker trafficking? Like how do we find out about that stuff?
Well, we actually have a basic course called Traffic Watch Academy US that we just launched several months ago. That's a 2-part series. It's all free. It's digital. It'll take you about 30 minutes to complete. And it would be great for your teenagers to take as well. I would suggest parents preview it, but it has lots of stories. You'll even hear a story from one of those fishermen that I just mentioned. And that's a great way to start. The first 15-minute module is on global human trafficking. It talks about statistics and who's affected. And then the second 15-minute module is all about trafficking in the United States and what to do if you spot it and what to look for in your community and who to call. And it gives you practical action steps for what to do right now, today, to start making an impact. So I would definitely suggest that resource.
That's awesome. So you recently came back from India, and I'm curious just kind of what you were doing on that trip. Preston jumped on right before your creative director, and I was giving him some high fives for all the amazing photos and video that he took. How'd that trip go? What'd you guys do over there?
Yeah, it was really, really good. It was the first time that we had gotten to see our India team in about 3 years because of COVID. And so the primary point was just to check in on them and connect as leaders and encourage them and see how they were doing, how they were faring. COVID definitely obviously hit hard in the States, but in places like India, it just, it decimated a lot. And so it was really good. Our primary focus was just to be there and be with them, especially our country director and our social worker that's there. But then secondarily, we did some marketing, content creation, and it was really exciting. And one of the things that we're moving away from as an organization is using actual footage of survivors from our rescue operations to protect survivor dignity. But to do that, it means we have to invest in gathering a lot more representative footage. And so that was one of our big tasks there, was going and gathering more representative footage so that we could continue to storytell and share about what's happening there in India. In India, the problem is just overwhelming. There are about 8 million that are enslaved just in that country alone. And a lot of times girls will be tricked or taken or kidnapped or deceived or sold by family members as young as 12 and 13 years old. And we actually had our country director was telling us about some cases that he had worked where they're younger girls and they have to service 30 to 40 clients a day, which is just horrific. Like, it's hard to wrap your mind around. So they're facing incredible odds, but one time I asked him, I said, how do you keep doing this work? It just feels like too much. And he said, well, yes, there's a lot of darkness, but light always wins, right? Yes.
Like a question.
Right.
Like a question.
Yeah. It was like,
right?
Why are you even, well, yeah, like, why are you asking me this? Of course, light always wins. So anyway, he calls his work, he says, we have to snatch them from the fire. So that's what he calls his work with police, snatching survivors from the fire. So yeah, so it was a hard trip in some ways, but a really good trip in a lot of ways too.
Yeah. And I was gonna ask you something different, but what you just said reminded me of a conversation when we went and visited you guys, a few months ago. And one thing that I think is so, you mentioned it from, the sense of being overwhelmed when you consider trying to be more aware, right? And how your life changes. But for you guys in the line of business that you're in, it's not that your life has changed. You're completely aware. So how do you hold on to those victories in the light in the sea of darkness that it just seems so overwhelming? Like when we think about supporting you guys and the desires that we have, the giving desires, and even Matt's been telling us we need to get out there and go knock on some doors and stuff, so we're all about it. But even with that stuff, like it just
hold on
seems.
my wife is not all about it. I still have some
Right.
convincing to do on that front.
You and I are all about
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
To be
yeah,
clear, you and I
yeah.
are all about it. Um, but I'm just curious, how do you pull the hope and the joy and the miracles and all the goodness out of just such I mean, it is so overwhelming.
Yeah. It's depressing. I mean, it is
Yeah.
so, yeah, it is overwhelming. It is depressing. I mean, I will be honest, there is probably not 1 week in the course of 10 years that I have not wanted to quit, or Matt has not wanted to quit. Like every single week, like this is too hard. We are bleeding out. This organization is bleeding out for these survivors that will never meet, and cases get tipped off, or funding is hard, or curveballs happen. And so I'm reiterating your point. It is really hard. The issue itself is dark and has such spiritual weight, but then the work is hard and slow going. And I think, for me, it really has come down to my own spiritual journey and my own spiritual health. I think, in the first probably 8 years, there was a real unhealthy super gluing of my identity with the identity of the Exodus Road. And when people liked the Exodus Road, or the Exodus Road was going well, then my identity was doing well. And if the opposite happened, then that was true too. And I think it's really hard to stay in a place of hope when that's the mentality, when it's just results driven, right? And in the last 2 or 3 years, I've really done a lot of hard soul work in what does it mean to look under the surface at the real work that's being done, and celebrating the small victories, celebrating the fact that, wow, only one case was successful, but this team presented 15 cases. That's amazing. I mean, you have to train your eyes to scan the field and look for the little sprouts of growth, and just throw a party for every single one of those, because you have this understanding of how much farming and how much work has to go into every little seed that's growing. But I think for me personally, when I really started to unattach my own identity with the success or failing from other people's opinions of the work itself, it opened the door for me to be a lot more hopeful regardless of the circumstances, right? We till the field, we pull the weeds, we plant the seeds, but only God can make it grow, right? And remembering that, remembering that He's the one that makes it grow, and He's the one that controls the rain, and He's the one ultimately that loves these vulnerable children more than I can even comprehend.
Mm. Yeah.
That
that's
is the
awesome.
hope underneath it.
I think that's so powerful, especially you talk about identity. That's something that, we've been talking a lot about lately with, even what's our identity as a father, as a husband, as a friend, as as a military member coming out of the military. Like, who are we? Where do you attach this importance? And I just think I think you put that beautifully. And there's also a sense of responsibility, right? I think it's a very special place that I'm trying to get to in my faith of recognizing that my responsibility is, if I'm serving God and I was talking to somebody about this the other day, they're like, I don't want to give to that person on the side of the street because I just, I don't know what they're going to do with it. And there was this news story and they went and got a Mercedes. I'm like, yeah, but that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to honor God and do what you're going to do. Your gift is in that. Your treasure in heaven is in that. And ultimately, our responsibility lies there. And I think that's what I also love about it. The awareness piece is we all have a responsibility to be aware of this. I mean, at the end of the day, we have a responsibility, and whether you want to acknowledge it or not, there is somebody that's going to try to exploit your child. Like, that's just how I look at it. There's just people that are going to see, and whether it's something in them or whatever, that they're going to want to exploit your family, your child. And not that you walk around in fear, but it's just to close your eyes to that reality is a very willful act in and of itself. And I think it's just so super important. And I want to ask you one last question that just kind of popped in my head. But when people are becoming aware, how should you best vet an organization like Exodus Road or others? Because there's some other organizations that have gotten, been in the news and they were pretty big and they're just doing things that they're getting a lot of money, but maybe not using that the best way. And I'm just curious, how should someone like us vet organizations that we give to?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's really, really hard because it's really hard, right, to look and see what's really happening beneath the surface, especially if the work is international. And so I would say if the work is international, definitely look towards if the organization is centering and empowering national voices of that community and national leaders. Because if they're not, then the ability for that good work to sustain over the long term is probably not very high. So I would say that would be one thing. Look for, if they're doing international work, what is the place in leadership, and how does the Western marketing team treat and center voices of national leaders? I think that's really important. I think obviously just on a practical level, looking at people's finances is really important, right? Finances always tell the story. And so make sure that the group you're vetting is, has audited financials from third parties and has public 990s posted and public audits posted and has all of the highest ratings on all the Charity Navigator sites and all of that stuff. That's really important too. And then I think too, just making sure that organizations have really clear visions and that the stories or the metrics or the impact that they're sharing online or raising money on, that matches what their stated vision is. Because I think a lot of times people can get a little bit off track because there's so much good to do in the world. And there's so many kind of sexy topics or hot button fundraising topics. And people kind of jump on different bandwagons just to capture whatever the social media flavor is of the day. And I think it's just really important to make sure there's consistency there. And then I think the next thing is just talking to people who are in the organization at all levels, not just the leaders, but also, the person that answers the phone right off the bat. What do they have to say about the organization's work? I think you learn a lot from an organization's culture and efficacy based on what the people within that ecosystem, how they talk about it and how they feel about it and what they're saying about it, I think says a lot too.
Speaking of people that work in the organization, Preston came on ahead of time, and this is for Preston, but tell Preston that he needs to do more podcasts because the podcasts that you guys do are awesome. And I'll listen to an episode and then I'll be like, oh man, that's it. Like, when's the next episode coming out? So tell him to do more episodes.
I know. Yes.
I mean, he's doing amazing work, but
is phenomenal. I know. And there's so many stories to tell. I tell you what, like we just have so many. Yeah. It's just, capacity. I think that's the challenge with nonprofit work. It's just, we have so much. I actually was in a board meeting this past weekend and I was actually mortified because I cried in the board meeting. And the reason I cried in the board meeting was because we had just heard from our regional director in Latin America, and he was telling us about what they were doing. And we have just a small but mighty team there. And I actually watched a video of a survivor being reunited with her mother. And and then we flipped into the conversation around finances, right? And it was just this juxtaposition around what we could do and what we can do. And I think that's a real burden for people in nonprofit work. I mean, in any business leaders work, but I think that just brought me to tears in the middle of the board meeting on Saturday, because we have more podcasts to make, we have more survivors to rescue. We have more people to train, but we're limited by our capacity, and yet we have to, I know there's an actual miracle in that too, right? Like there's a miracle in the lessons that we're learning in prioritizing, but there is a burden there that can be heavy sometimes.
You guys are doing amazing work.
Well, thanks.
You really are. David?
I tell you, it's, I pray that there's a miracle in folks listening to these podcasts, and there's, resources generated, awareness created. And I think, I think there's just I think things like this, while they seem small, there's an impact. And I'm a firm believer that, you and Matt and everybody in the organization, you're not going to realize the true impact of your work. You're not going to realize the true miracles. You're not going to realize the true just pleasure that God takes until you get to heaven. I'm a firm believer. And so hopefully, that's encouragement to continue to crush it. And you guys are literally saving lives. You're changing lives, and it's beautiful. We love Exodus Road. We love you guys. I know that what you're doing is blessing others. It's creating miracles for other people's lives. And it's just so important. And I'm so extremely grateful and humbled to be a part of your guys' lives, and that you joined us today. So thank you.
Oh yeah. Thank you so much. We just appreciate all the generosity and all the support you guys have shown Exodus Road over the years. We're really grateful.
Yeah, so we'll put all the links in our show notes. We'll put your website, Traffic Watch Academy, your podcast, anything else that you want to just, hit on real fast before we end today?
Yeah, I think all of those things are phenomenal. I think if you want to learn more about the work of the Exodus Road, definitely spend some time on our social media accounts, spend some time on our website. You're welcome to download my book for free. And I would just say, take a step. You don't have to have the whole answer for how you're going to, as a single human being, solve the problem of human trafficking, but every person on this planet has a responsibility to take a step towards the marginalized. We're all connected. We all belong to each other. So I would encourage whatever that looks like for you to take a step towards this issue.
Love it. Love it. Well, guys and gals, hey, check out Exodus Road. Go, hey, sign up for Traffic Watch Academy. Like, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to post my completion on social media. Here's the challenge. Everyone listening to this, go sign up for Traffic Watch Academy, go listen to their podcast, get engaged, and let's make a difference. Share this episode, screenshot this, post it on your social medias, tag us, tag Laura. Hey, let's, one little starfish thrown into the sea at a time is going to make a difference. So let's go do it together. And most importantly, go fill your storehouse.
I don't know if like that's the most important at
that's
the
true.
End of an episode.
Most
like
importantly,
if filling your storehouse includes a giving plan and
Good
helping the marginalized, then most importantly, fill your storehouse.
Thanks for calling.
And make it a great day. Thanks. Hey, thank you so much, Laura. You're awesome. I can't wait to see you guys again.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. And I'll send you the link to that landing page for the parent resources too.
That'd be awesome.
That's a great one. Include in the follow-up.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Awesome. All right. You guys are awesome. Well, have a great day.
All right. Thanks for listening to Filling the Storehouse. If you enjoyed our show, please subscribe and share it with someone you love. And if you really felt inspired, leave a 5-star review so we could continue to grow and help other Christian entrepreneurs fill their storehouse. If you're interested in creating financial freedom through real estate investing, be sure to check out our website at storehouse310turnkey.com. We'd love to serve you through our platform of building the kingdom. Just click on the contact link and we'll reply to you as soon as we can. Again, thanks so much for listening. Now go fill your storehouse and make it a great day.